The night his wife disappeared, Lucas Hale rode home under a moon too thin to comfort a broken man. The desert wind chased him like a warning he didn't know how to hear. His horse moved fast, hoofs pounding out the panic inside his chest, but no speed in the world could outrun the fear clawing at him. Something was wrong. He felt it before he saw it. Their little cabin sat quiet on the hill, but the front door swung open like a wounded mouth. The lantern still burned inside, trembling in the breeze. Lucas didn't think. He jumped off the saddle before the horse even stopped and ran toward the darkness waiting for him inside. Her dress lay torn on the floor. The dinner she made for him still sat on the table, untouched, turning cold. Her wedding ring, that was the part that broke him. It lay in the dirt just beyond the porch, glinting beneath the moonlight. She never once took it off. Not for chores. Not for sleep. Not even for the bath. That ring was her promise. And now it lay abandoned like hope itself had been thrown aside. Lucas turned it over in his hand with a shaking thumb, the metal still warm as if she had worn it only moments before he arrived. And maybe she had. Maybe he missed her by minutes. That thought ripped his heart open in a way no bullet ever could. He called her name. No answer. He called again. Only silence replied. Not silence. Wrong kind of silence. This silence listened. This silence waited. Lucas breathed in the smell of dust and fear and knew one thing for certain: she hadn't left on her own. Someone took her. Someone dared to take the only good thing left in his world. He mounted his horse again with nothing but a lantern and a heart full of rage. He rode straight into town where the sheriff sat pretending to keep order in a place where good people had been disappearing for years. Lucas didn't care about laws anymore. Laws didn't care about his wife. By the time he reached the saloon, his knuckles hurt from holding the reins too tight. The saloon doors swung open, music spilling out, folks pretending evil didn't lurk just outside the lamplight. Lucas walked in, lantern still in hand, eyes full of storm. Men stared at him. They didn't recognize him at first. They knew Lucas as a quiet rancher, gentle with his horse and gentle with his words. But this man standing before them wasn't gentle anymore. Grief had sharpened him into something dangerous. The sheriff, sitting at a card table with a smirk that didn't belong on a man sworn to protect others, looked up and mocked the urgency in Lucas's voice. When Lucas begged him to form a search party, to ride out now before the trail went cold, the sheriff leaned back in his chair and said she probably just left. Women do that sometimes. Maybe she realized she married a poor man with a small life. Maybe she ran off with someone richer. Better. Lucas didn't breathe at all for a moment. Because if he did, he'd kill the sheriff on the spot. But then the sheriff made a mistake. He laughed. And Lucas saw something in his eyes that wasn't surprise or concern. It was familiarity. Recognition. Like he already knew. Lucas left the saloon before the rage won. Because rage kills fast, but justice kills true. He waited until morning to search the edge of town. The tracks led to the cliffs, then vanished where wagon wheels had been dragged through the riverbed to hide direction. Whoever took her knew how to erase a trail. Criminal hands. Professional hands. Lucas rode along the river until he reached a small homestead. Smoke curled from the chimney, gentle like nothing bad ever happened there. He dismounted, walked to the barn, and found hoof prints that matched the ones near his house. The owner stepped out, nervous posture betraying guilt before his lips could lie. Lucas asked questions. The man answered with fear and trembling. The truth surfaced in fragments. Not words, eyes. The way they darted toward the town. Toward the sheriff's office. Lucas realized he had been asking the wrong question all night. It wasn't who took his wife. It was who allowed it. He returned home and cleaned his revolver with the same hands his wife once held gently. He loaded each bullet with trembling devotion, whispering a promise into the chamber: he would bring her back, or he would bring hell to every soul who stood in his way. As the sun set behind blood-red clouds, Lucas mounted his horse again. The small ranch behind him looked emptier than any place should. But emptiness had a purpose now. Emptiness was fuel. People whispered that night about the man riding through town with eyes full of death. Children hid. Mothers locked their doors. The sheriff watched from his office window, uneasy for the first time. He knew a storm was coming, a storm that wore boots and a hat and grief like armor. The desert wind followed Lucas again, but this time he wasn't afraid of it. This time, the wind carried his wife's name. And he rode toward the ones who took her like a man who had already buried his fear. Tonight, justice slept. But Lucas Hale didn't. And when the sun rose again, someone was going to die. The rancher who told Lucas the truth didn't sleep that night, and neither did the town. Rumors flickered through the streets like sparks on dry grass. Lucas Hale was armed, furious, and riding toward the sheriff. Everyone knew what that meant. Nobody wanted to be nearby when it happened. Lucas didn't storm the sheriff's office. No rage-blind fool would get his wife back that way. Revenge was a luxury. He didn't have time for luxuries. He needed information, and even corrupt men feared something more than bullets: exposure. He went first to the general store before dawn, where Mr. Pike kept his records in neat ledgers, goods bought, names signed, destinations noted. Pike was unlocking the front door when Lucas approached. He froze, hands shaking so hard the keys dropped. Lucas didn't raise his gun. He simply looked at Pike like a man who'd already lost everything except the need for answers. Pike stammered excuses before Lucas even asked the question. The sheriff had ordered 3 crates of food delivered north toward Redwater Ridge 3 nights earlier, the same night Lucas's wife disappeared. A private delivery, paid in gold. No explanation. No guards. No receipt. The sheriff had always claimed that Ridge was abandoned. Pike gave Lucas the ledger page, and Lucas left without another word. Something inside him shifted. He felt a direction now. A path. For the first time since the night he found her ring, he had a place to ride toward. But the sheriff heard Pike talking. By the time Lucas mounted his horse, 3 deputies were waiting in the alley, rifles raised. The sheriff stepped from behind them slow and smug, like he already owned the outcome. "Lucas," he said with fake sympathy. "I can't let you go causing trouble. We can't have folks thinking they can threaten the law." Lucas didn't flinch. "You ain't the law." The deputies moved to surround him. Lucas didn't draw. Not at first. He waited until one deputy made the fatal mistake of underestimating a grieving man. The deputy reached for Lucas's reins, and that was the moment everything turned red. Lucas's revolver cleared leather like lightning. One shot cracked the morning air, sending the deputy staggering backward. Lucas reloaded without thinking. He fired again at the man on the right, sending him to his knees, clutching a shoulder now dripping with red. The third deputy panicked and shot wild, grazing Lucas's arm but losing his nerve. Lucas didn't kill him. He just disarmed him fast, one punch so hard the rifle flew like driftwood. Every witness in town saw it. The shock wasn't in the violence. It was in the precision. Lucas Hale wasn't some ranch hand lashing out. He fought like a man who had spent his younger years with a gun before he chose a quiet life. The sheriff scrambled backward toward the saloon door, his face pale enough to match the dusty morning. He wasn't afraid of Lucas's anger, he was afraid of his aim. "Your wife ain't up north," the sheriff shouted shakily. "I didn't take her." Lucas stared at him, breathing heavy but calm. "But you know who did." He didn't have to say more. The sheriff broke. He snapped. Fear turned him stupid, and he blurted the truth he had kept buried. "She's worth money. You don't get it, she wasn't supposed to be at home. They were talking others, but she got in the way." Lucas hit him so hard the sheriff dropped into the dust. No bullet. No killing. That wasn't justice, not yet. He rode out of town bleeding from his arm, ledger page stuffed in his coat, and the sheriff still choking on his own lies. No one chased him. No one dared. The trail toward Redwater Ridge was long and merciless. By noon, the heat shimmered across the sand, turning the world into a furnace. Lucas didn't stop. Pain kept him upright. Love kept him breathing. Hours later, he reached an abandoned staging post at the base of the ridge. Burned-out wagons. Rope fibers scattered on the ground. Empty cages, big enough for people. His chest tightened until he thought his ribs might shatter. She had been here. He found cloth snagged on a nail. Her dress. The same color she wore the day she vanished. He pressed it to his face, and for a heartbeat he could smell her instead of dust and blood. He almost broke then. Almost crumbled. But something else caught his eye. Boot prints. 5 men. Heavy. Armed. Leading further up the ridge, but only 4 sets came back down. One had stayed behind, or never made it out. Lucas followed the tracks to a ravine half hidden by boulders. The echo of voices drifted up from somewhere below, arguments, rough and impatient. Something about money. Something about the girl. Something about the buyer not arriving. Lucas lay flat against the rocks and listened. Every word sank into him like hooks. They hadn't delivered her yet. She was alive. The world didn't stop spinning, but Lucas felt it slow. He closed his eyes, breathed once, deep, steady, controlled. From that moment, his death didn't matter. His pain didn't matter. His soul didn't matter. There was only his wife. He stood, cocked his revolver, and walked straight into the ravine. The first guard died before he could scream. The second barely had time to turn. The third fired twice, bullets ricocheting off stone, one grazing Lucas's ribs, the other sparking against rock. Lucas kept moving even as blood warmed his shirt. The fourth man, the biggest, tackled him from behind, slamming both of them into the dirt. They rolled violently, striking ground and stone. Lucas lost the gun. The guard grabbed a knife. Lucas fought with raw desperation, fists, elbows, teeth, until his hand closed around a rock, and he brought it down hard. Then again. And again. Silence returned to the ravine. A heavy, awful silence. Lucas staggered to his feet, shaking, bruised, bleeding, standing in the dust of 4 fallen men. And then. A sound behind him. Soft. Weak. Real. Lucas. His heart stopped. He turned. She was there. Bound, battered, terrified, but alive. He dropped to his knees beside her, hands shaking as he cut the ropes. She collapsed into his arms like someone who had been holding herself together for too long. But before he could speak, before he could breathe, a gun clicked behind him. You should have stayed a rancher, Hale. Not one of the 4 guards. Something worse. Someone he never expected. Someone neither he nor his wife would survive if he chose wrong. Lucas didn't move, not even to breathe. The sheriff's gun pressed between his shoulders like a hot nail, the metal steady and confident, the kind of grip that came from routine rather than fear. The street around them stayed quiet. 100 boots and spurs moved inches away, but nobody dared notice. Too many people knew exactly how the sheriff handled loose ends. You should have stayed a rancher, Hale, the sheriff muttered, voice thick with disappointment, or maybe pride. Lucas couldn't tell. And you should have stayed a peacekeeper, Lucas answered, slow and steady so his voice didn't shake. But here we are. The sheriff gave a soft laugh. You think I do this because I need money? You think this territory runs on prayers and good hearts? He pushed Lucas forward into a shadowed alley, where sunlight couldn't witness anything. This land is built on men who know how to take what they want. Lucas stopped walking only when the gun barrel wedged under his ribs. Then I'm not your kind of man. You could be, the sheriff said. That's why you're still breathing. Lucas finally looked him in the eye, and the truth hit like a punch, the sheriff really did admire him. Lucas wasn't prey, he was a prospect. The sheriff holstered the gun in a single smooth motion, drawing a cigarette instead. You're smart. You're strong. You don't fold when life hits you. Hell, you're the exact kind of man this town follows. He lit the cigarette with a shaking match. You and I? We could run this place. Every ranch, every wagon route, every life that matters. Lucas didn't speak. Words were fragile right now. We know you've been tracking the men who took your wife, the sheriff said, blowing smoke toward him. But what if I told you the same men could make you rich? Powerful? Untouchable? Lucas's fists slowly curled. You're offering me the world from the ground that buried her. The sheriff shrugged. There's profit in everything. Even tragedy. Lucas wanted to hit him. Instead, he stayed still. You want justice, the sheriff continued. Real justice? Not fairy tales? Then you need men like me. The governor, the bankers, the mine foremen, they don't move unless we make them. You want power? You take it. By selling people? Lucas asked. To men who choose to buy them, the sheriff snapped back. Don't pretend you didn't figure it out. You think this ring runs on force? It runs on demand. We simply supply. Lucas swallowed the bile building in his throat. And my wife? Was she supply too? The sheriff watched him carefully, measuring his breaking point. She was leverage. We needed loyalty from a rancher near the border. She became the payment. His voice softened like he was offering comfort. She didn't suffer, Lucas. Truly. She was treated well. She died because you didn't hand over your land. Everything inside Lucas froze. There was no breath left. All that held him upright was rage acting as bone. But you can make it mean something, the sheriff said. Join us. Run this operation with me. You'll never lose anything again. You take revenge, you take control, you become the man everyone fears. Your wife wasn't supposed to die, but her death doesn't have to be worthless. Lucas forced himself to look calm. So, you're offering me a throne? Exactly. The sheriff wrote something on a scrap of paper, the location of their next shipment. I'll introduce you to the men running this territory. You'll stand beside me. They'll salute you. No more pain, no more loss. Just power. He placed the paper in Lucas's hand, almost gentle. Lucas nodded once. No emotion. What do you need from me? A gesture, the sheriff said. A show of faith. He stepped closer, their boots almost touching. The man who helped you earlier, the shopkeeper. He's been dissolving shipments. Quietly. Someone tipped him off, and I suspect it was you. Lucas stayed expressionless. What do you want me to do? The sheriff smiled, proud of his new recruit. Kill him. Publicly. Tonight. Let the town see you bleed out the last bit of your softness. Lucas's pulse hammered in his neck. And then? And then you're one of us. The sheriff opened his arms as if welcoming him home. And together, we'll own this place. Lucas pretended to think. A long silence, just breathing in dust. Then he nodded. Fine. I'll do it. The sheriff grinned, pleased beyond measure. Good man. I knew you had it in you. But when he turned to walk out of the alley, Lucas didn't move. Sheriff, Lucas said quietly. One more thing. The sheriff paused and looked back. What? Lucas stepped close enough to smell the tobacco on his breath. Were you the one who pulled the trigger on my wife? The sheriff didn't hesitate, pride had no brakes. I gave the order. Best decision I ever made. Lucas smiled, but not with joy. Then I'll see you tonight. The sheriff walked away believing he had gained an ally. Lucas watched him leave knowing exactly who had to die next. He crushed the paper in his fist like a vow and whispered to the dust, "Justice is coming." By the time the sun climbed to the highest point of the sky, the whole town already knew something was coming. Nobody said it out loud, but every door shut a little too fast, Horses moved to the far end of their posts, and the dusty street that was usually full of wagons now sat wide open, like the ground itself was bracing for blood. Lucas walked down the center of town with his coat unbuttoned, hands low, hat shadowing his eyes. Every window he passed held a face half hidden behind curtains. Nobody wanted to be seen watching, but nobody could look away. He stopped exactly in the middle of the road, right where the dust split for wagon wheels. The sun glared like a witness with no mercy. He didn't shout. Didn't call anybody out. He just waited. The sheriff stepped out of the saloon, slow and confident, as if Lucas's presence was nothing more than another chore. He adjusted his badge, brushed the dust from his vest, and walked to the middle of the street. "You got the look of a man who's made up his mind," the sheriff said. "I have," Lucas answered. "You kill that shopkeeper like I told you?" the sheriff asked. "No." The sheriff nodded once, unbothered. "So this is how it's gonna go?" "Yeah," Lucas said. People didn't breathe. The street didn't move. There were no rules spoken or needed. They both knew exactly what this was. The sheriff rested his thumb on the hammer of his revolver. "I liked you, Hale. You could have been something." Lucas stared at him, eyes steady. "I am something. I'm the man who came to finish this." The sheriff smiled at the ground like he'd heard a joke. "When that gun comes up, you'll be dead before you get the hammer back. We'll see." The wind paused, the heat tightened, the earth held its breath, and the world snapped. Two guns cleared leather. The sheriff fired first. Lucas dropped his shoulder just an inch, just enough, and the bullet ripped across his upper arm, hot, deep, wicked, but he didn't stop, didn't stagger, didn't blink. He fired once. The sheriff stumbled. The badge on his chest lurched sideways like it had tried to take the bullet for him, but the round punched just beneath it, tearing through lung and bone. The sheriff fired again anyway, wild and desperate. The shot missed and shattered a window. Lucas fired a second time. The sheriff hit the ground, palms slamming into the dirt like he was trying to grab hold of life before it slipped away. His hat rolled off. His breaths came sharp and fast, already drowning. He looked up at Lucas. No arrogance now. Just realization. You had a clean draw," he gasped. Lucas stood above him, blood dripping down his arm. "No. I had a reason." The sheriff clawed at Lucas's boot, needing an audience for his last words. "This town needs men like me." Lucas shook his head. "No. It needs men who bury men like you." The sheriff tried to speak again, but his voice broke, and before the words reached daylight, the life left his body. Nobody rushed forward. Nobody screamed. Nobody cheered. They just listened to the silence. Lucas holstered his weapon with a slow, pained breath. The wound burned like fire, but pain wasn't his enemy anymore. Pain was the proof that he was still here. A voice finally broke the stillness, the shopkeeper, shaking but standing tall in his doorway. "What now, Lucas?" Lucas looked at the town, at the quiet faces, the cracked saloon windows, the dust that would never wash clean. "Now? We clean out every man who had his hand in this ring. We tear it out root and bone." "Alone?" the shopkeeper asked. "If I have to." Another voice called from a porch. "You're not alone." Then another. And another. Not loud. Not dramatic. Just tired souls choosing dignity. Lucas wiped the blood from his palm. "Then we start tonight." He turned to leave, but something pulled him toward the hill outside town. The graveyard. One grave in particular. He walked there alone. His wife's headstone sat under a crooked tree, simple and unadorned. Lucas knelt, breathing uneven from pain and memory. The words stuck in his throat before they finally came out. "It's done. He paid for it." The wind shifted, brushing the grass around the grave like a hand smoothing a dress. Lucas lowered his head. "I don't know what comes next. But I'll make this place safe. I'll make sure nobody loses what I lost. The silence didn't answer, but it didn't need to. He stood again. Not healed. Not whole. But stronger than grief. He looked down at the town that needed rebuilding, guarding, defending. Tomorrow, he whispered. Tomorrow I start again. He turned from the grave, hand resting lightly on the revolver that had ended a nightmare. A single line carried him back down the hill, steady and certain. Justice isn't a bullet. It's the man who's willing to fire it.